I'm going to tell you guys some information that you've never heard of because other people don't tell you the truth about Bitcoin and gold. I'm going to tell you the truth today. Who controls Bitcoin? If you control the hash rate, you control Bitcoin. You can reverse transactions, jam block the entire network so nothing happens. In the white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto, remember his first line, Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer electronic payment system. Warren Buffett even said US dollar could be a currency that's going to hell. People watching this channel are usually really into crypto or Bitcoin. You don't need me to tell you any more about why Bitcoin is great. We've already heard a lot of the reasons why from Bitcoin maxis. That's why you're in crypto, that's why you're in Bitcoin. So I'm going to be honest with you guys and tell you some of the reasons why Bitcoin could be a problem that Bitcoin maxis don't tell you about. And it's key to keep those things in mind. One that I often talk about a lot is that Bitcoin often mimics the stock market. The Nasdaq bottomed exactly at April 7th as well. If Nasdaq doesn't do a new breakthrough to confirm to new all-time high, maybe Bitcoin doesn't either. So it could be as simple as that. You can transport Bitcoin quite easily. Gold is quite heavy, like one kilo of gold is $100,000. Even just to move 1 million US dollars, you need 10 kilos of gold. You get taxed when you go to a place like Dubai, like Malaysia, they tax you 14%. They're like, oh, you've brought in $1 million of gold. Here's $140,000 in tax. Imagine that. But going forward, Bitcoin has three other threats. Mostly gold doesn't have. First of all, the obvious one is quantum computing. When quantum computing comes along, that basically means it can be cracked. But I've made long videos about this before, so I'm not going to dive into it here. Bitcoin needs to do a hard fork. When you do a hard fork, to be quantum resistant, you lose something like 30 to 50% of all Bitcoins. So imagine that. And second of all, Blackrock might own enough Bitcoin that when you do a hard fork, they might be able to weigh in and say, we recognize this chain as the new Bitcoin. This other chain that most of these plebs, average ordinary citizens like, that's not Bitcoin for us. They might be powerful enough to actually swing that. Because Bitcoin has forked like at least twice in short history of 15 years already. You had Litcoin, Bitcoin Cash. These all actually came from the Bitcoin blockchain, where more than 50% of the activity is happening, of the mining is happening, where the hash rate is, to call that the new Bitcoin. Some people might say Bitcoin Cash was actually the real Bitcoin, because in the white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto, remember his first line, if you read that white paper of Bitcoin, he says, Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer, right, electronic payment system. That's what Bitcoin Cash is. He never said Bitcoin is a store of value or digital gold. He never said that. And you could argue the current Bitcoin, whether we have today is, or Bitcoin Cash, who is the real Bitcoin? That's not an argument I'm going into today. But one more thing I'm going to point out, who controls Bitcoin? If you control the hash rate, you control Bitcoin. Like with any proof of mining blockchain, if you control 51% of the hash, you can do what's called a 51% hash attack. You can reverse transactions. You can jam block the entire network so nothing happens. That means whoever's got the cheapest electricity in the world controls Bitcoin. And who has the cheapest electricity in the world? Well, China. It had 70 to 80% of the hash rate in the world was coming from China by mid-2020. It was second cheapest electricity in the world. 99% of all Bitcoin mining machines, the RSIC mining machines, come from China. China decided to ban Bitcoin mining because it costs too much electricity, so they kicked all the Bitcoin miners out. But one day, because China develops EVs and solar power at exponential rate, they will have the cheapest electricity in the world by far. They're going to manufacture 99% of the world's Bitcoin mining machines as well. They already do. So if China wants to, if Bitcoin goes to 500,000 or 1 mil, and China wants to control Bitcoin network because it's so valuable now, they easily could. It's basically two companies. One's called bitmain. It's founded by a guy called Jihan. He got kicked out, and so he started his own little company called Bitdeer. They both dominate like 85-90% of the 95% of the Bitcoin miners machines market. So there you go. Now gold. I just want to show you guys the chart of gold. I've spoken plenty of good things about gold, but here is one risk we need to be aware of if we are into gold, and that risk is called government suppression. So this is the price of gold, but US government, conspiracy theories say, has been suppressing the price of gold for a long time. We can see here, the reason why Bitcoin was invented, you could say, and why Bitcoin has done so well is because gold hasn't done its job. When the US was doing massive quantitative easing, printing money, so to speak, gold ran up from just below $1,000 to $2,000. It only went up 2x. When US government is doing so much money printing, there's so much inflation in the world, so you would think you want an asset that would go up a lot. And that's what Bitcoin has done. It's protected a lot of people. But then look, gold topped in mid-2011. It basically spent all that time down in this big bear bottom, right? For 10 years, as the governments did QE around the world, central banks printed money, gold went nowhere and then went flat here. So you could say you had no protection for those 10, 12 years. Like inflation's random, and yet gold didn't protect you during that time. And then finally this breakout, and it went to $35,000. So a decent move, but you could say, what if this government suppression happens again in the future? Well, the news I've got for you guys is that right now, one other country, one other major superpower is actually trying to use gold to back its new currency and trading system. And that country is called China. China's basically has this Shanghai Gold Exchange and is basically created a new vault in Hong Kong. And it's created another vault in Saudi Arabia. There's some big rumors about Saudi Arabia. That one hasn't been confirmed yet, but in Shanghai, so far it's happening. So what does that mean? Well, it basically means that the system that China's trying to create to trade with the world, because countries like Russia are being kicked off the SWIFT system, so they can't trade in US dollars. But before then, everything trades in US dollars. Even now, China trades in US dollars. So basically, China is being threatened by Trump to be kicked off the SWIFT trading system as well. So China's basically saying, okay, we're going to create this new system where we trade, for example, in oil with Saudi Arabia. And I pick Saudi Arabia as the most important example because that's where petrol comes from, hence the Petrodollar. They used to pay US dollars every time via SWIFT, every time they buy something from Saudis, and vice versa. Saudis buy something from China, they also pay US dollars, both countries. But now what they do is they say, we don't pay each other US dollars, we just make a ledger, make a record of you bought this much oil, I bought this much solar panels and EVs from China. And then at the end of the month, we just tally it and see, oh, what's the difference in our trade? The net difference is actually quite small. It's not $100 billion, it's only like $3 billion. Okay, then China says, I owe you, Saudi Arabia, $3 billion. But you don't trust RMB, you don't trust the yuan because it's not as powerful as the US dollar. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna give you $3 billion worth of gold. Would you trust that? And Saudis say, yes, I trust that, but I can't go into China and get a, Hercules airplane or whatever and airlift those gold bars out of China because, it's nobody can do that from China. Like you got the second most powerful military in the world. So China says, then would you trust me if I was to open a branch of the Shanghai Gold Exchange in Hong Kong, Singapore, London, and maybe Dubai and Saudi Arabia? So then it's inside your territory, inside your jurisdiction. When we trade, then you can just come in and just take those gold bars from me. Then you can be confident and feel 100% safe when you trade with China. So that is the plan that nobody's talking about except Pablo. I'm telling you guys this insider info that nobody else has. That's what China's planning to do. That will bring back gold from being this irrelevant piece of metal from some rocks into this currency again that's going to be back in the international trade system being promoted by BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and the global south, with countries such as Saudi Arabia. And that is the key because Saudi Arabia only sells oil in US dollars since 1972, which is the linchpin to this entire petrodollar system. Once that breaks, once you're selling oil in gold or RMB, the Chinese yuan, then the monopoly of the petrodollar system breaks. Then if people don't have confidence in the US government, then why are you holding US dollars? I keep on showing folks this in my Discord and in my videos as well, that someone like Warren Buffett even said US dollar could be a currency that's going to help. Warren Buffett is actually very much a patriot. With like $37 trillion in debt from the US government, and then we basically have that massive crisis in confidence, then that's when we see the Chinese Bitcoin can possibly go to much higher, 300,000, 400,000. Crazy numbers are then possible. Then gold per kilo can then go to crazy numbers like 500,000, 1 mil, whatever. Gold, in that case, is coming back, the return of the king.